If you insist on coming, then don't call me your father. That's what my dad told me, just days before my mom's anniversary party. Why? Because my sister was bringing her new boyfriend, a CFO, polished, presentable. I'm Rachel, the quiet daughter, the one no one ever noticed in family photos, but the one who quietly co-founded a biotech company that now employs over 60 people. So when my sister's boyfriend looked at me at that party and said, "Wait, you're my boss?" I didn't need to say a word. Have you ever been the invisible one in your family until you weren't? Tell me. What would you have done? Drop your thoughts below. I'm listening. Everyone smiled in the Christmas photo, except me. You could barely see my face, half hidden behind the tree. Someone had asked me to scoot over just a little to make room for Lena's boyfriend at the time. I did. I always did. Even the flash didn't find me that year, and maybe no one noticed, but I did. I still remember the bitter edge of peppermint hot chocolate as I sat quietly beside the fireplace, watching Lena unwrap a designer coat, while the gift I had brought for our parents, a set of candles and specialty coffee, stayed unopened, resting on the hallway table. I wrapped them carefully with tissue paper and ribbon, but they never even moved them. It's early March now, 2 days into daylight saving time. Outside my apartment in Newton, Massachusetts, the sidewalks are still damp from the previous night's drizzle, and the morning air smells like wet pavement and half-hearted spring. My place is small, 2 bedrooms, one of which has become my home office, minimalist, quiet, efficient, like me. I sat at the kitchen island sipping a double espresso from a ceramic mug that had a faint chip near the handle. I never replaced it. I liked that it had a flaw. In front of me, my laptop blinked to life, and emails rolled in, mostly investor updates and project reports. I flagged a few for later and leaned back, letting the warmth from the mug settle in my hands. People always ask me what I do, and I usually keep it simple. Biotech, I say. It saves time. But the truth is more layered. I'm the co-founder of Arden Biotech, a healthcare startup based in Boston. We work on preventive gene therapy, specifically in autoimmune diseases. We just closed Series B funding a few months ago. Not many people in my family know that, or care to ask. When I told my parents I co-founded a company, they congratulated me, briefly. Then they asked how Lena was doing. Always Lena. She's 3 years older than me, beautiful in a soft, universally appealing way. Kind eyes, natural grace. She speaks in tones that people like to hear. Lena never had to explain herself. She was always our Lena, the one people admired and remembered at church, at weddings, at community picnics. I was the other one, the one with the laptop. I'd grown used to being quiet, to slipping in and out of rooms like light, but I still tried. I always tried. That's why this year I cleared 3 days off my calendar to fly home early for my parents' 35th anniversary. I wasn't planning anything fancy, just helping set up, maybe organize the food, refill drinks, light candles. I always handled the practical side of things. Lena was the one who smiled for pictures. I dialed their number that morning. My fingers tapped gently against the countertop as the phone rang. Dad answered. He didn't sound tired or angry, just neutral. That neutral tone he always used when he wanted to say something final without sounding like a villain. "Hey, Dad," I began. "I was thinking of coming in a little early this year for the anniversary, just to help with setup or anything you might need. Let me know what to bring." There was a pause, a long one. "Rachel, if possible, maybe don't come home this year." The silence between us swelled. I thought he was worried I had work. "It's okay, Dad. I've already cleared my schedule. I can fly in Thursday morning and stay through Sunday." Another pause. Then he exhaled, like he had made a decision he didn't want to revisit. "Lena's bringing her new boyfriend, Ethan. He's a CFO, real sharp guy, polished, well-spoken. We're meeting him for the first time and, well, your job, it's hard to explain. You being there might make things a little awkward. The comparisons, you know?" I didn't reply. I stared at the cracked tile near the stove. The silence between us turned heavy. "Are you saying I'd embarrass you?" I asked quietly. He didn't hesitate. "If you insist on coming," he said, "then don't call me your father." The line went dead. I stayed there for a long time, my hand still holding the phone, the espresso cooling rapidly in my other. I wasn't sure what I was waiting for. Maybe a call back, a message, something. It never came. I put the phone down. No slamming, no tears. Just placed it on the counter. There are moments in life that don't come with a storm. They come with stillness. And in that stillness, something in you breaks. Or maybe not breaks, but wakes. I walked over to my desk, opened my laptop, and stared at the screen for a second. My banking app was already bookmarked. I clicked on it and logged in. I had been sending them money every month, quietly. Internet, electric, water. Small things. They never asked if I could afford it. They just assumed I would, and I did, because I thought that if I stayed useful, I'd stay loved. But love isn't measured in utility. It's measured in regard. The cursor blinked in the corner of the screen, hovering over the Recurring Payments tab, and I made a decision. Some people rage quit their families, slam doors, shout truths too long swallowed, unfriend everyone on Facebook. Me? I just stopped paying their Wi-Fi. The sunlight slanted across my kitchen table in that familiar late afternoon way, casting soft shadows through the blinds. My coffee had gone lukewarm, half drunk in a chipped blue mug that once came free with a holiday gift basket. My laptop was open, humming quietly, like it had a secret to tell. Or maybe it was just waiting for me to acknowledge something I'd been pushing away for too long. I pulled up my banking app. The login screen blinked with routine ease, two-factor authentication, a confirmation text. Then there it was, my dashboard. Neatly organized tabs, transaction history, recurring payments, and in one tidy list, my history with them. Over the last 2 years, I had quietly covered just about everything: electricity, water, internet, groceries. Sometimes it was an extra 100 when the fridge broke. Other times, a few hundred more when Lena was between jobs and needed help with household coverage. They never asked if I could afford it. They just asked. I scrolled. $246.70. Comcast $189.20. National Grid $137.45. City Water Services $75. Monthly grocery deposit month after month. No, thank you. No, we appreciate you. Just brief, cheerful texts from my mother. Hi, sweetheart. Power bills here again? Can you handle it? Lena's a little tight this month. Rachel, do you mind sending early this time? Ethan's visiting and we want to make the house look nice. The smiley face in that one lingered. I clicked open the transaction summary. The total, $15,274.32. It stared back at me like a mirror. Every digit was a quiet affirmation of how hard I had tried to hold my place in a family that only remembered me when something needed fixing. It wasn't just money, it was the role I played. The dependable one. The quiet one. The she-can-handle-it daughter. My efforts weren't appreciated, they were expected. A memory floated up, uninvited. It was nearly midnight. I was still in the lab, running the last of the autoimmune sequencing batch before a presentation the next day. I hadn't eaten since lunch. My phone buzzed, a text from Dad. Can you pay the water bill tonight? It's due. No. How's the project? No. Are you eating? Just logistics. That same night, Lena posted a photo from Aruba, sun-kissed, smiling, cocktail in hand, captioned, "Living my best life." The comment from Mom read, "Our beautiful girl, so happy you're enjoying a well-deserved break." No one asked where I was. I snapped back to the screen. My finger hovered over the edit button next to the first recurring payment. Comcast, cancel, confirm. One by one, I moved down the list. Water, cancel, confirm. electricity, cancel, confirm. There were no alarms, no dramatic alerts, just clean little messages, auto payment canceled successfully. When I reached the final item, groceries, I paused. My thumb rested on the trackpad. I took a breath, steady and full, like I was preparing to release a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. Click, done. I sat back in the chair. The quiet in the apartment was familiar but felt heavier, as if even the walls needed a moment to process what I had just done. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel guilty, just still. There's a kind of silence that arrives not from being ignored, but from choosing not to raise your voice, a kind that wraps around you, not to isolate, but to protect. I stood and walked to the window. Outside, the wind had picked up. A branch from the tree across the street tapped against a window pane somewhere nearby. The sky had begun to shift into that grayish lavender tone that tells you the day is done whether you're ready or not. I thought about calling them, about sending a message. But what would I say? The account's closed because you forgot I existed. That wasn't it. They hadn't forgotten me, not really. They just never learned how to see me fully in the first place. I returned to the kitchen, rinsed my mug, and placed it on the drying rack. My phone buzzed, a notification from the same finance app. Transaction summary available. I didn't open it. Instead, I sat back down, opened my work email, and replied to a junior analyst's question about next quarter's projection. There were still things to do, problems to solve, just not theirs anymore. As I typed, a thought floated up, light as breath. Let's see how long silence echoes. The house was filled with flowers, candles, and trays of catered food. A banner stretched across the arbor, celebrating 35 years, Douglas and Karen. The backyard looked like a catalog spread, white folding chairs, burlap table runners, string lights curling through the trees. Someone had even rented a Bluetooth speaker to play soft jazz. Everything was perfect until the power went out. I wasn't there, of course. I was in my apartment sitting cross-legged on the couch, sipping peppermint tea and watching the clouds roll in through the window. The mug was warm in my hands, grounding. I'd lit a lavender candle an hour ago and opened all the windows just enough to let in the breeze. Newton was quiet, the kind of quiet that doesn't ask questions. My phone buzzed. First it was a text from Mom. "Rachel, can you check on the internet? It's down. People are arriving." I stared at the screen for a long second. Then I locked it and set it face down on the table. Not a minute later, Dad's message popped up. "No power. Water pressure's low. Call the utility company. Fix this." There was no "hi," no "how are you?" Just orders. I leaned back and exhaled slowly through my nose. The tea was just the right temperature now. Outside, a bird hopped along the railing of the neighbor's porch. It took off, vanished into the cloudy sky. The phone buzzed again. Lena. "Seriously, Rachel? The internet? We have guests. Ethan just got here." I didn't reply. There was nothing to say. I had canceled every bill. Quietly, deliberately. There had been no fight, no email, no notice. Just a clean break. If I was no longer their daughter, then surely I was no longer their logistics manager either. The screen went dark again. I took another sip of tea. It was only when the FaceTime call came in from Aunt Margaret that I paused. I hesitated, thumb hovering over the green icon. Then, against instinct, I answered. Her face filled the screen. She was standing in the kitchen, lit only by daylight from the back door. Behind her, chaos was beginning to swell. "Rachel," she said, breath a little short. "Honey, the whole house is out. Lights, stove, internet. Your mom's in a panic." I nodded once. "I'm aware." A pause. She blinked. "Did you do this?" I didn't answer. Not yes, not number. Then from behind her, a voice called out. Deep, clear, unfamiliar. "Hey, I think your call's still connected." And just like that, Ethan walked into the frame. He froze mid-step. His eyes locked onto mine. I watched the moment realization hit him. He looked down as if confirming something, then back at me. His posture straightened. "Rachel Green?" he said. I nodded slightly, calm as glass. You're the Rachel Green? Arden Biotech? I gave him a faint smile. Welcome to the family. The air in the background turned electric. I could hear movement, a chair scraping, Lena's voice calling out something muffled. Ethan swallowed. You're my... He stopped, blinked, then said again, quieter this time. You're my boss. Another pause. I adjusted the camera slightly so that the logo on the folder behind me came into focus. Arden Biotech, Founders Edition. It had been there the whole time. I said, still soft, let's catch up on Monday. Enjoy the party. And with that, I ended the call. I placed the phone back on the table, gently, like setting down a stone I'd carried too long. My shoulders relaxed. The apartment was still. Nothing stirred except the slow swirl of steam rising from my mug. For once, I didn't need to say a word. Outside, the wind shifted, brushing against the curtains like an old memory. I sat there, listening, not to the silence, but to the fullness of it. It didn't feel empty. It felt earned. They said I would make things awkward if I showed up, but awkwardness had found them anyway. Not through shouting, not through revenge, just through the quiet presence of truth finally surfacing. And truth, when spoken softly, still echoes loud. They didn't call to check on me. They called because the internet was still down. Morning came slowly, as if the sun itself was reluctant to break through the thick gray over Newton. I woke to the sound of light rain against my window, the world outside damp and blurred, the kind of morning where everything felt softer but heavier too. I wrapped myself in an old cardigan and wandered to the kitchen, half expecting the familiar rush of notifications. The phone didn't disappoint. Dozens of unread messages waited, banners piling over each other like snowdrifts. The first was from Mom. Rachel, the guests are gone, but we still have no internet. Your father says he can't check the news. Could you please just fix it? The tone was businesslike, as if nothing out of the ordinary had happened. I read the words once, twice, then swiped the thread away. Lena's message came next, long and splintered. You made Mom cry. I hope you're happy. She worked so hard on everything and all you had to do was not make things weird. Ethan barely said 2 words to me after you hung up. You didn't have to do any of this. I let my thumb hover above the reply button, but I didn't type anything. The apartment was filled with the gentle tick of the wall clock, the hush that follows a rainstorm. I poured myself a cup of coffee and watched a thin curl of steam rise and vanish. Among the avalanche of texts, one email stood out. It was from Ethan, short but honest. Rachel, I want you to know I respect the way you stayed silent yesterday. You deserved better. I'm sorry I didn't see things more clearly before. Ethan. I read his message twice. It was the first note of genuine respect I'd received from someone connected to my family in a long time. No pity, just observation and understanding. I wrote back, Thank you, Ethan. Everyone chooses how they see others. I've just stopped hoping they'll see me differently. There was no reply, but there didn't need to be. Back on my phone, another alert blinked. Dad this time. Still no internet, water's running slow, just call the providers. No greeting, no, how are you? Just another item to be checked off a list. I deleted the message. It felt good in a quiet way to let it disappear without response. I wasn't angry. I simply had nothing left to give that part of myself. I stepped out onto the balcony with my coffee, watching droplets run down the railing. I thought about last night, about Ethan's face when he realized who I was, about Lena's angry texts, about the way my parents could talk around a problem until it went away, or until I fixed it for them. My phone buzzed again, but this time it was a voice message from Aunt Margaret. I hesitated, thumb hovering over the play icon. Her voice came through soft with a catch at the end. Rachel, I just wanted you to know I heard what he said to you. Ethan, I mean. I saw how everyone acted. If I were your mother or your father, I would have been proud. I just thought you should hear that from someone. I stood very still, feeling something in my chest loosen, a knot I'd forgotten I was holding. It wasn't an apology from my parents, but it was something better. Recognition. There is a saying that sometimes the strongest words are the ones left unspoken. In the quiet, I felt seen, if only for a moment, and it was enough to warm me more than the coffee in my hands. I lingered on the balcony until the drizzle faded and the morning took on a pale, silver light. I thought about the cost of always being the one who makes things easy for others. How often I had filled the silences, paid the bills, fixed the broken connections, both literal and emotional. How tired I was of being needed only for what I could provide, never for who I was. Then, just as I was about to return inside, the doorbell rang. The sound startled me. It was rare for anyone to visit without warning. I glanced through the peephole. My parents stood at the door. I didn't move at first, letting the moment hang between us, just as so many silences had hung in our family. I wasn't sure what they wanted, but for once I wasn't afraid of the answer. Sometimes, when the noise fades, all you have left is the truth. They didn't come to say sorry, they came with numbers. It was just after 6 when they arrived. Rain had settled into a steady rhythm outside, drumming softly against the window panes. The sky was a dull slate, the kind of gray that turned everything quiet and slightly blurred. I had set out 3 mugs and brewed a fresh pot of tea, not coffee. I didn't want them to feel at home. When I opened the door, Mom offered a hesitant smile. She held a small brown paper bag and stepped inside first. "We brought your favorite," she said, placing it gently on the counter. "Lemon tart from Parker's." I glanced at the label. I hadn't eaten lemon in over 3 years, a mild allergy. I had mentioned it once, briefly, during a rushed phone call about a burst pipe. Clearly, it hadn't stuck. "Thank you," I said politely, not unkindly. I didn't open the box. Dad walked in behind her, rain still beating on his coat. He didn't look angry, but there was a tightness to his jaw, a certain rigidity to how he placed himself in the room, like a man preparing to argue but hoping he wouldn't have to. We all sat at the table. 3 mugs, 3 people, 1 storm, barely hidden beneath the surface. There was a moment of silence, the kind that pretends to be polite but isn't. Mom cleared her throat and smoothed her hands over her lap. "You've always been so responsible, Rachel," she began. "Even when you were little, you kept your allowance in envelopes, color-coded." Dad jumped in before she could get too sentimental. "We've been thinking," he said, tone clipped. "Now that you're doing well, very well, we wanted to talk about something more structured. Your mom and I are getting older. Costs are rising. If possible, we'd appreciate some monthly support, something consistent." Around 2,000, I let his words hang there for a second, absorbing their weight. 2,000. Not as a gift, but as an expectation. There was no shame in his voice, no hesitation. "What about Lena?" I asked calmly. They both paused. My mother tilted her head slightly. "She's not doing great," she said. "The breakup with Ethan hit her hard. Work's been unstable. She's trying, but she's sensitive." I nodded slowly, then stood and walked to my desk. I pulled a folder from the drawer, simple gray, labeled with 1 word in my handwriting: family. I returned to the table and laid it down. Inside, 2 years of receipts, bank transfers, bill confirmations, every electric bill, every grocery deposit, every last cable payment. I opened the folder and turned it toward them. "You never asked how I was," I said, voice steady. "Just when the cable was paid." Dad leaned forward, eyebrows tightening. "Rachel, what is this supposed to prove?" "That I've already given," I replied, quietly, consistently, without asking for anything in return. I tracked it, just in case. He exhaled through his nose. "That's not the point. We're family. Family helps each other." "Then let's act like it," I said. "If you want support going forward, Lena contributes her part, 1,000, and there needs to be an agreement, legal, that when both of you pass, all assets, including the house, come to me." The air in the room thickened. The rain outside intensified, as if responding to the shift in pressure. Dad's voice rose, not in a shout, but a deep snap. "Are we negotiating like strangers now?" I looked him in the eye. "We've treated each other like strangers for years. I'm just naming it." For a second, he looked stunned. Then his hands pressed flat against the table, and he stood. "I can't believe this," he muttered. "After everything. After raising you, feeding you." "Feeding me," I said, tone colder now. "Is that what this is? A return on investment?" He didn't answer. Mom reached across the table, touching the edge of the folder. "I just wish you didn't feel like this," she said softly. "Like we don't care." I looked down at the tart still sitting, unopened, on the counter. "You don't even know what I can eat." Silence again. This time it wasn't polite. This time it settled like fog between us. Dad grabbed his coat. "We're done here," he said, voice sharp. He walked to the door and opened it with too much force. The wind pushed back, flinging a few drops of rain onto the floor. Mom stood more slowly. At the doorway, she turned to me. "Rachel, we didn't mean to make you feel this way." I met her gaze, calm and unwavering. "You didn't ask how I felt at all." She blinked, as if the words struck harder than she expected. Then she followed Dad into the storm. I didn't close the door right away. I stood there for a moment, watching their silhouettes disappear down the walkway. The rain kept falling, steady and deliberate, tapping gently against the windows like a heartbeat. Inside, everything was still. The lemon tart sat untouched. The mugs had gone cold, and yet I felt lighter. Not because I had pushed back, but because for once I hadn't swallowed it all down. Healing didn't come from being heard. It came from no longer needing to be. It had been a week, a quiet one. Most people wouldn't notice the shift, but I did. It was in the way my chest no longer felt tight each time my phone buzzed, in the way my mornings unfolded, clean, slow, deliberate. I was sitting in a small cafe in Boston, one with creaky wooden chairs and rain-speckled windows. The kind of place that made you feel like time moved slower there. The espresso was sharp, citrusy. Jazz hummed low through the speakers. Outside, the street glistened from morning drizzle, umbrellas blooming open like slow flowers. Above the counter, someone had carved a quote into the reclaimed wood beam. "Home is not always a place. Sometimes it's a choice." I stared at it for a moment, letting the words settle. Then I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out my phone. My wallpaper used to be the family Christmas photo, the one where I was barely visible behind the tree. I'd kept it for years, out of hope, maybe, or habit. But this morning, I had replaced it. The screen now lit up with a clean, pale blue image, a molecular diagram of CRISPR-Cas9, the same one we used on the cover of Arden Biotech's proposal deck. That's where I live now, in the choices I made for myself. My inbox had 3 unread messages. I scanned past the investor update and clicked the one from Ethan. "Rachel, I ended things with Lena. I realized I'd been clinging to something that looked good on paper but didn't feel right in practice. I should have seen it sooner. But thank you for showing me who you are, without saying a word. I'll keep things professional from here, but I just wanted you to know I see you now, and I respect you deeply. Ethan." I exhaled quietly. Not relief, not satisfaction, just release. Then came the text. "Lena, please talk to him. He's misunderstanding everything. You could fix this if you just explained." I didn't hesitate. He didn't leave because of anything I said. He left because, for the first time, he saw. I placed the phone face down. A minute passed, then 2. I didn't wait for a reply. Back at the office, I pushed through the glass doors of Arden Biotech and nodded to the receptionist. The hall smelled faintly of printer toner and eucalyptus, the scent from the diffusers we'd chosen to feel less corporate. I liked that detail. In the break room, one of our interns, Sophie, barely 22, was making tea. She smiled when she saw me. "Hi, Dr. Green," she said. "Do you ever I mean, do you ever miss your family? It wasn't a question meant to pry, more like one spoken from curiosity, or maybe a quiet fear of what adulthood sometimes looks like. I paused, then I answered honestly. Sometimes. But missing someone isn't the same as needing them. She nodded, thoughtful, stirred her tea a little slower. I walked to my office, opened the blinds, and stood by the window. Below, the city pulsed, not loudly, not frantically, just alive. Buses hissed to stops. People darted under umbrellas. A man in a blue coat waited for the light to change. I stood there for a while. No music, no noise, just breathe. Some stories aren't loud. They're quiet victories. And that was mine. I didn't walk away to win. I walked away to breathe. And somewhere in the quiet that followed, I finally heard my own piece. Sometimes the people we love don't know how to love us back, not because they don't care, but because they never learned how. That's why setting boundaries isn't cruel. It's a way of saying, I matter too. If you've ever felt invisible in your own family, I hope this story reminds you, you're not alone. And if it moved something in you, feel free to share what it made you remember. Because sometimes, the quietest stories are the ones that speak loudest to the heart.